Okay, just for a second, why don't you look at the date? It's Friday, February 6th, 2026.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're listening to this on your commute or maybe making breakfast, everything probably seems pretty normal.
Right. The world is turning, business as usual, on the surface.
Exactly. The lights are on, the coffee shop was open. But if you look at this stack of documents we've pulled, this future file, 2026 master source data we have on the desk, the picture changes completely.
Oh, it really does.
We're not looking at a normal Friday. We're looking at a precipice.
It's one of those the more you know, the less you sleep situations. I mean, what we have here is this really bizarre collection of reports.
Yeah.
On one side, you've got hard astrophysics, solar weather forecasts from NASA, and then over here, grim economic data on commercial real estate in London.
And cybersecurity drills.
And cybersecurity drills from the World Economic Forum, yeah. It feels totally disconnected.
It does. It feels like a scatter plot. Like, what does the sun have to do with an empty office building in Manhattan?
Right.
But our mission today is to show that these aren't random. They're converging. And this file claims they are converging on a timeline that peaks around, July of this year? 2026.
Exactly. And, to be clear, we're not here to scare anyone. We're just reading the map that the source provides. But it is identifying what it calls a structural shift.
A structural shift.
The argument is that the ground beneath our feet, the infrastructure, the economy, the digital rules, it's all being swapped out. And most of us are just too busy looking at our phones to notice.
So let's unpack this. We need to stop looking at the phone and start looking at what connects it to everything else. We're going to start with the physical vulnerability. And I think this is where the summary it hits you hard. The cloud is not in the sky.
No. That is the greatest marketing trick of the 21st century. The cloud is under the ocean.
The source data here on global internet infrastructure is.
Yeah.
It's just staggering. I think the average person assumes that by now, in 2026, we're all on Starlink.
Yeah.
That we're just beaming data from space, wire-free.
And we are beaming some data. But the heavy lifting, the high-frequency trading, streaming, diplomatic cables, all the massive data sets for AI, that's 99% fiber optic cables sitting on the seabed. The source makes a really critical point about bandwidth here. Satellites are for redundancy, sure, but for pure throughput, terabits per second.
No.
You can't replace glass cables with radio waves. Not yet.
So the backbone is still physical.
Yeah.
It's a cable about as thick as a garden hose.
Lying on the ocean floor.
Right.
Exactly. And that is the vulnerability. The report highlights these choke points. It's not a distributed web, It's more like a series of funnels.
I'm looking at the map they provided. And you've got the Red Sea and the Malacca Strait just lit up in bright red.
These are narrow corridors where dozens of critical cables are all bundled together. It's like running the entire nervous system of the global economy through a single straw.
And if you pinch that straw,
the flow stops. We've seen how fragile it is with the incidents in the Red Sea a couple of years back. But the source here is talking about something much more coordinated than, a stray anchor.
The term they use is global digital blackout.
Right. The risk assessment suggests that because we've concentrated all these assets in geopolitically unstable zones, physical sabotage is a primary threat. If you sever the cables in the Red Sea and the Med at the same time, you're not just slowing down Netflix.
Yeah.
You are effectively severing Europe from Asia.
And people always ask, but what about the backups? What about satellites?
Again, the source is very specific. They'd be overwhelmed instantly. The notes say that by July 2026, reliance on these backups is higher, but capacity hasn't caught up. So if the cables go, we don't just get slower internet, we get a blackout.
Okay, so that's the threat from below. The shark biting the line or the sub cutting the wire. But the future file also points up. And this part, I remember solar cycles from school, but this data makes it feel a lot more immediate.
Well, it's the difference between weather and climate, right? We are currently in the peak of solar cycle 25. And NASA and NOAA have been tracking this. It's significantly stronger than the early forecasts.
And we're not just talking about pretty auroras. The source brings up the Carrington event. For anyone who, skipped that day in history class, lay that out.
So 1859, a massive geomagnetic storm hits Earth. Telegraph wires literally caught fire. Operators were getting shocked. It was chaos for the tech of the time. But in 1859, the grid was just a few copper wires on wooden poles.
Right. If the telegraph goes down, you just get on a horse, life goes on.
Exactly. Today, our entire civilization runs on sensitive electronics. The source details the risk of what's called a coronal mass ejection, a CME hitting us with that same intensity.
And the physics of it is scary simple.
It is. The solar storm compresses Earth's magnetic field, and that induces these massive electrical currents in long conductors.
And long conductors is basically a perfect description of our power grid.
Precisely. The grid acts like a giant antenna, and it just soaks up all this energy. The result, it fries the high-voltage power transformers. And here's the key thing people miss. You cannot 3D print one of these.
No.
You can't just run down to the hardware store.
These things are the size of a house, right?
They're massive, they're custom built, and the lead time for a replacement is like 12 to 18 months.
A year and a half.
So the source scenario is a cascading grid failure. The sun takes out the transformers, power goes out. If the power goes out, the cooling for the server farms fails. And those internet cables we just talked about, they need power at the landing stations to boost the signal.
So it's a pincer movement. You've got man-made threats to the cables on the ocean floor and cosmic threats to the grid from the sun.
Converging right now in early 2026.
It's terrifying.
It just highlights how fragile our efficiency is. We stripped out all the redundancy to make things faster, cheaper, and now we have a system with zero margin for error. We're worried about someone cutting the cable, but the sun is threatening to turn off the machine the cable plugs into.
Which is...
Yeah,
a terrifying thought. But okay, let's pivot. Because if the lights do stay on and the internet stays up, there's still the economy. And this is where the future file takes a turn I really did not expect.
The ghost offices.
The ghost offices, yeah. Oh. Let's talk about the software of our society. The source has a section on what it calls the silent purge of commercial real estate.
And we all see this, right? If you live in a major city, you see the for lease signs, the empty lobbies. The data shows vacancy rates in London and New York are flirting with 25%.
Which is just historically unprecedented.
It is.
And usually when I read about this, it's framed as a disaster. The downtown is dying, city budgets are collapsing. But this source, it flips that. It argues this isn't a failure, it's a leverage point.
That's the key insight in this section. The collapse of physical real estate is viewed here as the death knell of the physical-first economy. The argument is that this capital isn't just vanishing, it's forcing a transition.
To what?
To a subscription-only model.
Walk me through that. How does an empty building in London lead to me renting my existence?
Well, think about asset deflation. If owning physical space is a liability, because no one goes there, it costs money to maintain, the value's dropping, then companies stop investing in atoms. They invest entirely in bits.
Right.
The source argues that by July 2026, this shift becomes structural. Companies they exist as digital platforms.
It's the Uberization of everything. You don't own the car, you don't own the office, you just access the service.
And that applies to you, the consumer, too. The ghost office is just the most visible symptom of a world where ownership is becoming obsolete. You don't own your software, you don't own your music, you increasingly don't own your car, you're a subscriber.
And a subscription can be canceled, unlike ownership.
That is the chilling part. If your business is a physical storefront, you have some autonomy. You can open your doors. But if your business is entirely dependent on, say, cloud services, API access, platform placement...
You serve the pleasure of the platform owner.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Which brings us to the control mechanism. If the physical world is emptying out, and we're all migrating into this digital subscription world, who holds the keys? Who decides if your subscription gets renewed?
And this is where the file gets into the Cyber Polygon drills.
Okay, I've seen this mentioned online, usually with a lot of conspiracy formatting. All caps, exclamation points.
Right, and we need to separate the signal from the noise here. Cyber Polygon is a real thing. It's a simulation exercise run by the World Economic Forum. It's in their own documents.
What are they simulating?
A cyber pandemic.
Which, given what we just talked about with the cables and the grid, actually sounds like a legitimate fear.
Oh, it is. The simulation posits that a malicious code could spread through the global supply chain faster than a biological virus. It could lock down logistics, banking, transport. Think 2020 supply chain issues, but happening in seconds.
Okay, so the problem is real. But the source here takes issue with the solution they propose.
The solution is the controversy. To stop a cyber pandemic, the simulation suggests you need total visibility. You need a digital ID for every user and every device on the network.
Zero trust architecture, I've heard that term.
Exactly. In tech, zero trust just means you verify everything. But apply that to the global internet and it means no anonymity. You can't get on the network unless you have a verified, trackable digital ID.
And the source frames this not as a security feature, but as a centralized digital prison.
That's the critics' view presented in the file, yeah. They argue that if you have a world where the physical economy is dead, remember the ghost offices, and the only way to work or buy anything is through the digital economy. Well, then the digital ID becomes your license to live.
The ultimate gatekeeper.
And the concern is that this gatekeeper isn't neutral. If the system decides you're a risk or you're non-compliant, your ID gets flagged. You're effectively wiped from the system.
And this is where that July 2026 deadline comes back. The source is claiming this isn't sci-fi. They're saying the infrastructure for this, the legal frameworks, the tech is being finalized now.
They call it the event horizon. The convergence is the point where the physical vulnerability, the cables, the sun, creates the crisis that justifies implementing the control grid, which is the digital ID.
That is a very heavy narrative. It's a problem-reaction-solution loop.
Yes. The crisis, whether it's a solar flare or a cable cut, becomes the excuse to lock the digital doors, and the AI aspect mentioned in the notes. It just reinforces this.
How so?
If you have an AI managing the network to prevent this cyber pandemic, you're handing the decision of who gets access to an algorithm that will always prioritize system stability over, say, individual liberty.
System stability sounds great until you're the anomaly it decides to stabilize.
Precisely. And in a subscription model, the anomaly is just unsubscribed.
Now, there's one specific detail in the notes that I want to drill down on. It's cryptic, but it stood out. The 88.9% browse signal.
Ah, yes, the leak metric.
It says an 88.9% browse signal on previous leaks proves people are waking up. What does that even mean? Is that just internet slang?
It reads like metadata analysis. Think about it. Every time you search for something, every article you click about, I don't know, CBDCs or solar flares, you generate a signal. The source seems to be implying they have data showing that nearly 90% of user traffic is now actively seeking out this kind of alternative information.
That's a huge number. You would suggest the mainstream narrative, everything's fine, go back to sleep. It isn't working.
That's the interpretation, that we're not in a world of sheep. We're in a world of people who know something is wrong. They see the empty offices. They feel the inflation. They are actively browsing for the truth. The browse signal is a proxy for awareness.
But does browsing change anything? I mean, I can know the train is coming, but if I'm tied to the tracks...
And that is the central tension of this whole deep dive. The source portrays this structural shift as almost inevitable. The cables are where they are. The sun is doing what it does.
But the waking up part, that's the wild card.
Exactly. It introduces a variable the simulation might not have accounted for: human agency.
If 88.9% of people realize the solution, the digital ID, the subscription model, is a trap,
they might reject it. They might build parallel systems. They might demand physical resiliency instead of just digital convenience.
So it turns into a race between the implementation of the control grid, that July deadline, and this critical mass of public awareness.
Then looking at the calendar, February to July, that's a sprint.
It really is. Okay, let's try to pull this all together because we've covered astrophysics, macroeconomics, and cybersecurity in, 15 minutes?
It's a complex web, but the strands are clear. Let's just look at the 3 pillars.
Okay, first up, the physical reality.
We are dangerously reliant on deep-sea cables in war zones while the sun is peaking in a cycle that threatens the entire grid. The hardware of our world is brittle.
Second, the economic shift.
The ghost offices. They're not just empty rooms. They're proof that the era of physical ownership is ending. We are being herded into a subscription economy where we just rent access.
And finally, the digital lock.
The Cyber Polygon scenario. It provides the perfect justification for a digital ID system that promises security but delivers centralized control. It lets an algorithm decide who gets to participate in the economy.
And it's all converging in mid-2026. A perfect storm of fragility and control.
And whether you see this as a grand plan or just a massive systemic failure, the outcome for you, the individual, is the same. You're vulnerable.
It definitely changes how I look at my internet connection today. It feels less like a utility and more like a leash. Or maybe a lifeline that's fraying.
I think leash is the right word if we ignore the risks. It's a lifeline if we prepare for them.
The source ended on that note, about the 88.9% signal, about people waking up. And I think that's where we should leave this for today.
It is the crucial question to end on.
If that number is real, if people really are realizing we're moving toward this subscription-only existence, what does it actually mean to be awake to that?
It asks a fundamental question about your own sovereignty. In this new world, Are you just a user generating data and paying fees? Or are you a stakeholder? If the lights go out or the cable's cut or your ID is flagged, do you have a plan B?
Do you own your future, or are you just renting it?
That's the question.
Something to think about. We'll be keeping an eye on the sunspots and the shipping lanes for you.
And the calendar.
And the calendar. Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.